Good afternoon. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you guys so much for coming. My name is Lillian Salmon. I'm going to be your host for tonight at our 2022 Human Rights Day ceremony. I'm very, very pleased to introduce my lovely team of co-hosts, Commissioner Daly, Commissioner Diamond, and Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you, and I'd like to take an opportunity to thank our sponsors. Our sponsors are, of course, Town Hall. Thank you for granting us this lovely space, as well as the University of Washington.
Coming up is Commissioner Daly and Commissioner Bennett to introduce our tone for the night and just kind of debrief on what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Good night, everyone. Good night and welcome. I'm very glad that you're here. I just want to acknowledge that tonight we want to make sure that there is no flash photography. If you have any of that, that would create a little bit of difficulty. And during our panel section, that we've already gathered all our questions, so it will not be where we're taking questions at this time. And that's just really important because we are on a timing situation. The program is going to be really, really tight. I am very glad that we were able to stage this event. And with that, I turn it over to Natasha.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you to all of those who are joining us via live stream. I just wanted to do a land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that we are on the land of the coastal Salish people, and we'd like to recognize that we occupy the traditional land of the Duwamish people, the first people of Seattle, both past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe, and recognize that statements like these must be accompanied by action and accountability. I'll go ahead and turn it over.
Thank you. So earlier on, I talked about not having flash photography. I want to talk about my own platform, which is Invisible Disabilities. Every time that we see someone in a space, like I'm tonight wearing my very dark glasses, I might seem very silly. Of course, I've had people make a few jokes about it. But, you know, a couple of years ago, I had a concussion, and as a result of that, I cannot stand in the light for too long. I get horrible migraines. And I want to talk about just how much we miss those invisible disabilities, that you don't have a missing arm, leg, or anything like that. And that is one of the rights that the Seattle Human Rights Commission is about. We're about many, many different rights, including invisible disabilities. And I just want to bear that in mind tonight as we go through and have our discussions. And with that, I'm turning it over to Risha.
A brief background on this event. So this human rights event has been commemorating human rights since 1963, when the Human Rights Commission began. Now, this event is not meant to celebrate, but it is meant to acknowledge the work that has been done and the work that continues to need to be done in terms of the unhoused, education, equity, as well as human trafficking.
All right, so at this time, the co-hosts will be backstage helping with all of those activities, and I would like to introduce our first panelist, Emmanuel Dolo.
Good evening. Every day my colleague Joyce, Roy, and I, we go from community to community trying to help struggling small businesses. And one day, one business owner looked at us and said, "What do you get for this kind of work? I mean, every day you're here." From tonight, I think I will have an answer for her. Hello, my name is Emmanuel Dolo. On behalf of my family, my wife is sitting there, and the African Chamber of Commerce and the African community, I'd like to thank all of you in the city of Seattle for the work you do to advance human rights and dignity. I'm really honored to be one of the individuals receiving awards here tonight. I work for the African Chamber of Commerce, and the African Chamber of Commerce has been around for over 20 years, 24 years to be exact, and we promote an environment for direct trade between the US and Africa. But then the other thing we do is that we build and strengthen the capacity of small businesses here, especially immigrant-owned businesses. And what we do is we provide technical support, business technical support. We build their capacity. We help them find and apply for loans and grants and all the resources they need. So far this year, we have applied for over 50 grants and 50 loans for small businesses. And out of that number, only 3% received grants and loans. The rest of the 97% did not receive anything. And there were several reasons. One of them is that those businesses do not have the collateral that will guarantee their loan. The other reason is that they have very bad credit. And because of that, there is no cash flow. And also because they are economically unstable. Whatever the situation is, I like to say, maybe somebody will be out there and say, how does this relate to human rights? Well, it relates to human rights in a way that most immigrants who start businesses here, they start those businesses as a way to create jobs for themselves, to generate income, and through the income to be able to put food on their table. So imagine an immigrant single mother who has no job, applied for grants and loan, and was denied. Imagine how that house is going to be. They're not going to have food on their table. They might end up going in the street. Also, the other reason why a lot of immigrants apply for loan is to fulfill their life dreams. Immigrants come from all over the world and they come here for different reasons. Some were chased out of their own homes and they were working, of course. They had their career and everything. They were well known nationally and internationally. But because they were driven, they had no means to continue with what they were doing before. So when they come here, one of the ways they think they can fulfill their dreams and restore their lost dignity is to start something. Because imagine if you were a big journalist in your country and you come here and you find yourself at Target or some kind of gas station as a security person, there's no way you're going to practice journalism at your gas station. So when you support small businesses, when you support people who are struggling to restore themselves, you are actually supporting a whole generation. But when you deny them and say because they don't have good credit and every other thing, you have put them down, you've taken every right from them. And human rights is all about all of us having some basic rights and protection, having a second chance to be able to stand and sit among people as a human being. I have a story here that I do not have the time to put on the board there. I have a guy called, his name is Antoine. He lived in the Democratic Republic of Congo before the war. He was a renowned journalist. Everybody knew him on television, but because of the war, when he came down here, he started driving for Uber. He had no means of practicing what he used to practice in his country. He came and joined our small business group. We got in cohort 2. Antoine, we helped him to start his own little business called Pinot 5. And just last month, when we had the African Day Business Forum, for the first time in more than 15 years, Antoine was able to do a documentary, and he saw himself on the screen again. That's why it means when you support one person, you are really restoring that person. And I think that is connected to human rights. So tonight, again, I want to thank you for this honor. And on behalf of my family, we are so honored. This is the biggest reward we've gotten from the work that we've been doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Introducing our next panelist is Mary Williams, who's a mother, community advocate, and ordained priest at Rainier Valley Congregation since 2001. She's been a community organizer, a board member, a peer educator with a range of Seattle nonprofits. Her work is extensive and ranges working with several institutions to undo racism, including the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, the National Coalition Building Institute, and Critical Resistance. She now works as a clinician, as a recovery coach as well, a peer counselor, and peer training for Washington State. So please welcome Mary Williams.
Hi, my name is Mary Williams. I'm with Ways Forward. Ways Forward, Washington Against Sexual Exploitation, is a Washington-based initiative to promote policies and practices that enhance support and justice for people with lived experience of sex trafficking and sexual exploitation. Our diverse leadership team consists of various professionals with direct services, research, and advocacy experience, and who are representative of communities most impacted by sex trafficking and exploitation, including lived experience experts. Our leadership team consists of Dr. Deborah Boyer, anthropologist, Carolyn DeFord, advocate for missing and murdered Indigenous women and people, Jerry Mumma, Executive Director of Innovations Human Trafficking Collaborative, Mar Bretman, PhD and Executive Director of BEST, Mary Williams, myself, Program and Policy Professional and Community Leader, Nature Carter, Program Manager for Gender-Based Violence at YWCA, Olivette Foster, Program Manager for POCAN, People of Color Against AIDS Network, and Rita Hernandez, PhD and Director of Policy and Advocacy for Atlas Free. So together, all of us, which I don't actually have a photo, but you may recognize some of our faces because we are out in the community a lot. So why do we do this issue? First, because the sex trade thrives on violence and exploitation. Decriminalizing prostitution is not the solution. Decriminalizing prostitution means decriminalizing pimps, brothel owners, sex buyers, and those bought for sex. We want to support those escaping the sex industry and escaping violence. The solution is to offer support for people to exit when they choose to, while holding buyers, pimps, and owners of brothels accountable for violence and exploitation. We hope to create a network of healing, support, and transition and services for adults with lived experiences of sex trafficking, tailored to the self-determined needs of each individual. Services may include advocacy, safety planning, housing, direct client assistance, substance use disorders treatment, medical and mental health services, legal advocacy, translation, interpretation, education, job training, and employment opportunities. We prioritize culturally competent and gender-inclusive services for communities that are disproportionately impacted: Black and African American, Indigenous, LGBTQIA++, Latina, and Asian and Pacific Islander communities are those communities. Prioritize parts of the state that lack services. This is something we're working towards. And we also want to involve survivors of sex trafficking in leadership and in service positions and the funding process. We hope to fund a study to assess the impacts of the commercial sex industry, especially on Black and African Americans in Washington State, with a special focus on Black and African American persons who identify as female. The study will produce a report that makes culturally informed and survivor-informed policy recommendations on reducing sex trafficking and sexual exploitation of Black and African Americans in the commercial sex industry in Washington. So our three components that we are pushing for and attempting to initiate legislation are: one, the statewide network, establishing that network of healing and transition services for survivors; two, for the underserved, emphasizing and prioritizing services for the most vulnerable, including those marginalized groups that I mentioned; and three, survivor-led leadership, involving leadership in service provision and in the funding process, prioritizing programs that increase agency and provide the choice to exit the sex trade. Remember, the sex industry thrives on violence and trauma. We need our legislators to protect those being harmed. Exiting the sex industry is a basic human right, and we hope to, in 2023, move forward with a bill number and to get these services into law. So with that, I will close, and thank you for listening. Thank you for letting me share.
Good evening. I would love to introduce an excellent educator to you. She has 31 years of teaching and educational administration experience. Monique Harrison is definitely an equity powerhouse. She's the definition of a transformational leader. And why I'm so enthusiastic about stating this is I've had the honor of working with her as, I was a math instructional coach and she was a math instructor, as well as at one point a school that she was a principal or assistant principal of. And I was a language teacher there, and I have personally witnessed the transformational impact that she's had on both students, particularly youth of color, youth from a wide variety of diverse backgrounds, as well as educators of color. She's been an excellent mentor and advocate, as well as, she's great for adult as well as youth learners. And she really focuses on addressing systemic inequities within our educational systems. Now, she's currently a social justice and School of Law instructor at City University. So please join me in welcoming Monique Harrison.
Good evening, everyone. I actually have a PowerPoint because I'm an educator. That's what we do. We make PowerPoints. Oh, I just thought about something. It is actually... There's a mouse on this somewhere. Okay, Andrea, I don't know how to work your computer. This would be, you know what? Let's go without the PowerPoint. I'm a teacher. I can do that. I can improv, right? So, I'm talking tonight about education, human rights, and social justice. And bringing the social justice piece into it, you have to, because it is, you can't have one without the other. So, let me go ahead and say what I was going to say. It's like I'm excited to be here with you all celebrating Human Rights Day. This is my 32nd year, so I've had 31 years, so I'm in my 32nd year as an educator. She told you I've been a principal, I'm a professor at City University, I'm a math specialist in the Kent School District now. I still serve as an educational consultant and as a mentor, and that's what I do. So I teach social justice, and the thing about the social justice piece is that social justice and human rights are the same, how do you say it? Two sides of the same coin? Two sides of the same coin. And human rights might be the most powerful principle for social justice because human rights is a piece of social justice. So, since human rights is a pillar of social justice, a just society is impossible with the absence of security for all human rights. Social justice is about building an inclusive society that respects human rights, where no one is neglected or harmed and everyone's rights are protected. When I was asked to be on this panel, I was thinking human rights, reaffirming human rights. And I went and I started asking my friends, what does it mean to reaffirm human rights? And one of my friends, who is a school teacher in Seattle Public Schools, I sent her the question and she gave it to her students. And so when we think about social justice and we're thinking about students in Seattle, I think about their voices. There's 4 pieces. That the social justice pieces that we do are student-centered. We look at a world and try to look at it through a student's lens. From the time they're 4 to the time they're 18, we're looking to see what the world looks like for them. And then interdisciplinary, we shouldn't look at social justice as just being a part like they learned it in history. And that's the only place they're going to see it, or in social studies. We should be able to have social justice integrated throughout every core subject, and that's what I teach in my social justice classes at City University, is how we integrate it seamlessly into every part of your classroom, your school, the district, and how we build on that. And we create advocates for themselves. And so the other part is the self-expression, their voices. And that's the biggest part, is us listening to them and listening to their words and hearing what they're saying and not assuming we know what they can and what they cannot do. And so one of the social justice areas that I talk about with my students at City University is ageism. And I think about ageism when I think about our students from the age of 4 to the age of 18. We're always telling them, oh, you're too young for that. Or even the fact that you're too old to do that. Or this or that. And one student actually said in hers, it's like, we've got to stop assuming that we know what somebody can do. And so, or cannot do. And so I was a 3-year-old that knew how to read. So if you have a child that's 4 and you're like, oh, they're too young to read, why? Why would you say that? We all learn at our own pace, correct? So I wanted to, so being that I had 21 student voices and I picked 6 of them that are in the PowerPoint, and I'm going to pull pieces of what they said. And I want you to hear this. And I mean, they wrote paragraphs when they were asked. And so it was like, I got to pull something out of this. So the PowerPoint slide actually says student voices. What does reaffirming human right mean? And so I have Michael, a high school student, Education is a right all students have. All students, young or old, should have equal access to education. Remember, these are like 14 to 17-year-olds that are saying these things. This is Olive. Basic human rights are self-explanatory when it comes to the name, yet so many people do not have them. Then we have Addie. Human rights are often forgotten or ignored based on societal bias, which is why they need to be reaffirmed. I love kids. That's why I taught high school and middle school for so long, right? All right, here we go. This is Peter. If society as a whole can learn to collaborate and support rather than separate and discourage, unification can go a long way. I'm like, oh, okay, that works. Then we have Connie. Education must focus on fostering respect for human rights and the complete development of the human personality. I was like, oh, that's so pretty. And then we have Cam. Lack of basic human rights requires protest in some way in order for them to be reaffirmed. So we are creating advocates. We are creating that next generation of people. And if we don't listen to them, this whole human rights, reaffirming, education, social justice is not going to come together for us. That unification that they're talking about, the fact that everybody deserves things, but as I looked at theirs, I saw a couple of more that I was like, okay, how much time I got? But I got a few more that I wanted to read because it was just my words. I can talk all I want. I've been talking for 54 years. So probably my mom would say that. But I want to hear what they need to say, because we can't change the education system. We can't change these pieces without their help, without their voices. And so, what's this one? Adults often assume, this is the one I was talking about, adults often assume the capacity and knowledge of younger people and are unwilling to consider new perspectives, instead shaming the children for not thinking how the adults shaming the children for not thinking how the adults think they should think. It's like, whoa, I had to stop and reread that one, didn't I? We got Naomi. We are all humans and we are all the same. Jasper, to reaffirm human rights, we need to be able to make all people be able to access the resources that individuals need to be able to live and exist. I still can't get over the fact that these are like 9th graders and 10th graders that are saying these things, and we would have been like, wait a minute. These are those advocates that we need for human rights. Reaffirming human rights means having some enforcement to get them the help they deserve with food, shelter, anything else that should be fundamentally accessible to people. Reaffirming human rights is a part of social justice. It means balancing the power in a way that people who have been denied a lot of essential rights will be able to get what they need. And then I'm gonna do Sonia. Sonia was the last one that I wanted to do, was like, as a student, reaffirming human rights means many things to me. It means that every individual deserves the right to an education. Our country hasn't given every person the same resources as everyone else, and that needs to change. We say that everyone should be treated with equality, and we haven't made that happen yet. If individuals aren't given the access to an education, they don't have the opportunity to learn about who they can become. Education is an important human right that paves the way towards success. And that is Sonia. And I'm going to end with Sonia because everything she said is what my entire speech was supposed to be about. Right? Right? All right. Thank you. Take my PowerPoint and go sit down.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce you to our next speaker, Raymond Connell. He was born in Kingston, Jamaica, immigrated to the US on August 13th, 1972. He moved to Seattle in September 1972, and graduated from the University of Washington in 1978 with a BA in Business Administration and received his JD from Seattle University School of Law in 1984. He is a trial attorney with an emphasis on real estate law, personal injury, and probate. On August 13, 2020, Raymond Connell was appointed by the Jamaica's Ministry of Affairs and Foreign Trade to be Honorary Consul to Seattle. Currently, he is the president of Friends of Jamaica Seattle and is also a member of the Rotary International. Please welcome Raymond Connell.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Andrea. It's a pleasure for me to be here, talk to you tonight, and I'm going to be really brief. Talk about some projects, international and local projects that I've been involved with, and that was primarily through Rotary International. First project is polio vaccination. That group of Rotarians went to Ethiopia. They've been doing this for years. And the goal is to stomp out polio. And we go from door to door in various villages in Ethiopia, and we administer polio vaccination. It's a little jar, vial. You put 2 drops in a child's mouth, and they'll never get polio. From there, we go on to Uganda and do water projects by helping the villages in northern Uganda to get water by repairing and installing boreholes. Boreholes are what we call wells, and we do that. Then the other project through Rotary and Friends of Jamaica, this is a joint project, is providing water to a community center in Kingston, Jamaica. Well, this is important because this community center that I'm talking about is where Bob Marley grew up, where Bob Marley learned to play the piano, and Bob Marley formed his group, the Wailers. Have you heard of Bob Marley before? I can't hear you. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about, is providing water to serve 3,000 people daily. And finally, I want to talk about a local project here, and something that I'm very passionate about is tiny homes. Tiny home, and we call it tiny homes as opposed to a house or tiny house, because a home is where you live. And this is important. These are little homes that are built, and it takes us about 2 days to actually build it and complete the construction and put it on a truck and take it to wherever the village is going to be. And with that, it's temporary housing, and people, families, stay there for maybe 2 or 3 months until permanent housing becomes available. And it's a very successful program. Most of the criticism that we hear is that it's unsightly and aesthetic. Well, I'm not an artist. I really don't care about that. The purpose is to get people off the street and in proper housing so that they can rebuild their self-esteem. Well, how is that related to human rights? Human rights, as we all know, there's a common definition that we have for human rights. Human rights is those moral principles that human beings can agree upon and thrive on. A great example of human rights is in our Constitution. The first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution is a broad covering of human rights. Those are what we call fundamental rights. And if you look at that, it expresses what human rights are. So what I just talked about, those are all examples of human rights. And I'm sure we all can agree that this is so important that it needs to be continued. I'd be happy to answer questions regarding tiny homes or any of the international projects that I've worked on. And thank you for your attention. Back to you. Over here.
Thank you. So now we'd like to introduce our individual awards. Every year we give awards for exceptional human rights leaders in our community and to organizations as well. So each one of our fantastic panelists has received an award, as well as one additional person. So I'll go ahead and announce our awards, and after you're announced, if you'd like to come up and give your acceptance speech, you also sent in pre-recorded videos, which I'm happy to hit play on if you'd prefer. So just let me know. Okay. Our first award goes to an educator, and this is the award of a human rights mentor. This year's award goes to Emery Walters. Emery Walters has worked with Seattle Public Schools for over 30 years and is a mentor in the Kingmakers program dedicated to mentoring young Black males. So Emery, would you like to come up to the stage? It's a long journey. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much, Natasha. Thank you. It's interesting, when they gave me the call the other day and they said that I was being honored for this type of award, I'm humbled, especially when I look on the stage and I see the greatness that's on the stage. We've got Raymond, we've got Dr. Harrison, we've got Mary, we've got Emmanuel, and I've listened to all the things that you guys are doing to kind of push forward this work of human rights. And I look at myself and I'm like, oh my goodness, I've only been teaching for 31 years. I haven't done anything compared to these guys. But I think it's really important to remember that if we can just change just one individual, we can change a complete generation. You know, when we start to look at the late greats like Martin Luther King Jr., Nat Turner, when we look at Malcolm X, Booker T. Washington, when we look at people like that, sometimes, I look at myself and say, who am I not to be great like them? I'm running my race and I'm staying in my lane. But again, to honor the 60 seconds that they told me that I have, I better read my script. Otherwise, I'd probably be up here all night talking about this stuff. A little bit about who I am. Again, my name is Emery Walters. I'm a proud 7-time Kingmakers facilitator, and Kingmakers is basically a program founded from the Office of African American Male Achievement, and again, as Natasha said, it's used to help kind of edify, uplift, and support young Black men that are farthest away from the educational system. And I'm really humbled and privileged to do this kind of work because I actually grew up in the south end of Seattle, and I'm a native I graduated from the Seattle Public School District, and what an amazing honor to be able to come back and give back to the community that I grew up and graduated from, and now I've been teaching for about 31 years in that same community. My why, well, first of all, let me, first and foremost, I want to thank you, the Center for Human Rights, for even allowing me the opportunity to come out here. A little bit about my why. My purpose has always been to leave the people, places, and spaces better than I found them. And as I get ready to close, I want to leave you with a quote from the late, great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And he said, and I believe it goes like this, I need you to be the best version of you so that I can be the best version of me. And I need to be the best version of me so that I can help you be the best version of you. And so again, I thank Seattle, I thank the Human Rights Commission for allowing me this opportunity and allowing me to be the best version of me. Thank you all.
Thank you. Our next award goes to a rising human rights leader, and the award goes to Emmanuel Dolo. One note, we didn't give his bio before his speech, so I'm going to do that now. Emmanuel is the Director of Programs at the African Chamber of Commerce of the Pacific Northwest. He's a versatile, detail-oriented manager with over 17 years of experience using PMI and other project management methodologies to initiate design and lead community development initiatives, humanitarian response, and post-crisis recovery, resilience, and reconstruction projects. He's currently a commissioner on the City of Seattle's Immigrant and Refugee Commission, a City of Auburn Transportation Advisory Board member, and the founder of Washington Trans Financial Services. He holds an MA in International Development and has received several international honors for his work, including the Global Laureate Fellow by the International Youth Foundation and the 2009 International Fellow by ILEAP, a Seattle-based organization. So I'll welcome Emmanuel to the mic. Congratulations.
Well, I have a 1-minute speech here, the press button speech, but I'm not going to give that. I would like to say something outside of that speech. First of all, I'd like to thank my wife for supporting me to do this work. But what I really would like to say is that this award belongs to 2 individuals in the audience tonight. One of them is Mr. Peter Geshuru, my boss. And if you would just join me to give him a hand of applause, I'll be happy. Let us. And then Mr. Geshuru has a very close friend of his, and he is Dr. Benjamin Umaru. Is he here tonight? Dr. Ben? Let us clap for Ben. Now, the reason I want to use this award to recognize Mr. Geshuru is that he came here as a very young fellow in 1963. And for all those years, he has been working for the African community, African immigrant community. Those who came here and didn't have anything, he would show them the system, from financial literacy to how to speak among Americans. It's not easy to transition from Africa to come here. And he has been doing that work. He's not very old. He's very young. In other words, he has been doing it for over 50 years, and he's still doing it today. Every day he takes me around to look for funding for our projects. With his trembling hands and his trembling voice, he'll get on the phone to talk to people. I am really inspired by you, sir, and this award tonight is for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and congratulations. Our next award is an individual for a human rights leader from Mary Williams. So welcome you to the mic, and congratulations. The microphone is not working on the computer.
I do. Okay. I was hoping she could press play. I really was.
The audio on the laptop is not working.
I really don't want to start tearing up. It's the hardest part. I'm a true Seattle girl. I've been on this stage once before when I was a Seattle Girls Choir participant. Actually, I left it back there because I didn't think I would need it. It's in that yellow, it's right in the windowsill. I just want to thank my parents. My mom is from Minnesota, Brooklyn Center, and my dad's from Rankin County in Jackson, Mississippi. And thanks to the World's Fair, they met up and made me a Seattle girl. And thanks to my son. See, that was the part that's really difficult. Actually, I think maybe you should read it, because now I'm a little...
I will.
Yes, there you go. Again, thanks, Nathaniel. Please take a picture. He hates to take pictures.
I'll go ahead and just read the statement.
Okay,
The whole thing? Yeah.
I really
Here?
would. It's only
Yeah.
2 minutes.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
So I, but not me, I'm grateful and humbled to be nominated for this award. It's very touching to be thought of this way as a leader, and I know my parents would be proud. My son is also very proud of the work I do, even though at times it has infringed on our time together. He has remained supportive and understands service to others is one of our family values. I'm thankful for the way my parents raised me with compassion for others and value for all types of hard work and all types of people. The fact that this award is on behalf of my fellow Seattle citizens and the Human Rights Commission is even more touching and meaningful to me. This really is a full circle moment. Again, to be chosen as a human rights leader is extremely humbling. It is important for me to be found at the forefront of movements that lift up the worth of each person, especially in the marginalized and vulnerable, and to show integrity in all of my relationships with others. I know what it is like to be ostracized, excluded, misjudged, and rejected, and most of all, to not be heard. I know how much it hurts and that harm can affect how we choose to live our lives. Therefore, I have lived my life in a way that I try to demonstrate and emulate love. Love for differences and always inclusion and respect for others. Love through genuine gratitude for blessings, love through performing acts of service, and love through responsible stewardship of our resources. And finally, being abstinent from substances, fully clean and sober to focus and participate in my life and the life of others. To take the time to now have the presence in mind to value the specialness in each moment and the specialness of each individual, to show love and care and being fully present for others. I'm so fortunate for all who went before me and paved the way for me so that I can now be in a position to be heard, to share an opinion or my lived experience, and to have my opinion hold depth and weight to highlight the importance of inclusion in all areas of human interaction and in our society. Thank you for showing me with this award, with your hospitality and love.
I should have just tried to read it.
Our next award is for a human rights educator, the Award of Leader, Dr. Monique Harrison.
Can I just read hers? Thank you. I wrote it so I would stay within the 1 minute, so it's like 54 seconds, so that was the 6 seconds to make up. I am truly honored and humbled to be recognized by the Seattle Human Rights Commission. I thank you all for selecting me as your 2022 Seattle Human Rights Leadership Award recipient as the Educator Human Rights Leader. I am so proud to be standing on this stage with all of the honorees. I am especially proud of Mr. Emery Walters. Emery was one of my mentees. I was his mentor. And when I found out he got this award, when he texted me, I was so excited and so proud. And this is not part of my speech. I did not know I was going to go that route. But I knew, and his name is sitting here, so I was going to say, but just seeing him tonight for the first time, we spent a year and a half on Zoom, getting to know each other, and so just to see where he is today, I am so proud. Trisha Diamond was one of my teachers. She makes me proud. And I'm going to say that Emery and Trisha are like the perfect example and one of the many reasons why I do the work that I do. Apparently, I wrote Emery's name in here like 4 times, y'all. Emery and so many other Black educators and educators of color have given me a platform on which I can share my passion for education and increase the quality of educators that are affecting our children. I will utilize this award as motivation in my leadership to continue to fight for human rights and social justice in our educational system for our students who are, as Emery stated earlier, and I wrote it down, the furthest away from educational justice. Thank you.
Congratulations. And for our last individual award, last but certainly not least, we have a Social Justice Leader Award for Raymond Connell. if you would like to come up.
Thank you. Oh, I don't need to be around here since I have this, right? Okay. I prefer to be. This means a lot to me. My wife, the love of my life, is here in the audience. Dr. Anita Johnson Connell. She has served as a physician in this community for many years, and she is retired from OB, obstetrics and gynecology, and she has been the root, the main force behind our family. And I'm so proud to have her as my wife. She has also afforded me the opportunity to be able to go to Africa, Ethiopia, and Uganda. And I see my good friend in the back, Dr. Abe. Yes, we've been to. So in case you want to check my credibility and what I'm talking about, he is the guy that I've been to Uganda and Ethiopia with on several trips. The city of Seattle takes their human rights law into serious consideration. Human rights means a lot to the city. They walk the walk. And I know that firsthand on how they deal with human rights violation because I've represented people before them and they've investigated these cases aggressively. And so I know that Seattle Human Rights Department is really serious about human rights. I'm very happy and I'm humbled to receive this award. And I'm still, my parents, my mom, who is responsible for bringing me to this country 50 years ago, God bless her soul. In fact, this will be 3 years now since we lost her. And it would be a real thrill for her to see her one son, that's what she calls me, even though I have two older brothers, but I'm called one son, and it's a Jamaican thing. And for her, it would have been a real honor for her to see her one son receive this honor. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it and how sincere I am. I'm not giving you some glib, but this means so much to me. And I know my time is up, but please understand how much I appreciate what's the consideration that went into presenting this award. I'm sitting among giants in their field, and I'm saying, what am I doing here? But I'm just a simple country lawyer. I represent my folks, and at the same time, God has given me the opportunity to do a little bit more to help our fellow man. And it so happens to be the area of human rights that I'm involved in. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So that wraps up our portion for our individual awards. We'll now move into our panel discussion now that we have our 4 panelists here seated. And just to let you know, we will do our group awards after the panel discussion. So we'll go ahead and introduce the panel.
Hello, 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 hello again to you, and hello to my lovely panelists. Are you guys ready for these hot topic questions? Be honest.
Much better. I'd rather just talk amongst ourselves.
What human rights area are you seeing the most progress in, and what area do you think we need to focus our energy on seeing more growth? This is a question for the panel. So go ahead. Don't all start talking at once, but you know.
You want me to go first? Well, I think institutional problems need to be given real attention. when it comes to how individuals are being interacted with by institutions. Makes us to think that there is a need for more work. For example, I work with grassroots people, so I like to give very common examples, right? So one of the businesses we work for, which is a commercial driving business, this guy reserved a vehicle through the platform, and then they sent him to this pickup spot to go and get a vehicle. But then when he got there, the person who was controlling the pickup spot did not like him because of the way he was talking. So then she refused to give him the vehicle. And then he walked back home and went back on the platform again and reserved the same vehicle. After he called the company and said, well, I reserved a vehicle to be picked up today, but the people they refused to give it to me. So what do I do? And then they told him, oh, you can reserve it and go and get it. So he went back on the platform and reserved the vehicle and came back to the pickup spot. And the lady said, I told you I'm not going to give you this vehicle. In fact, you are never to return in the hour. And then he came back. And the same thing keeps going on and on. And this institution I'm talking about is a very big company. It's moving around here. It's doing a lot of good things. Everybody's praising it. So what I'm seeing is that the Human Rights Commission here has to go to the latent level. I mean, to the level where you don't see things that are happening, but they are buried underneath. They have to kind of go a little bit deeper, kind of get closer to these institutions, these companies, these big groups. I mean, look at the number of homeless people in Seattle.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay? The fundamental human rights of all human beings is food, shelter, and clothes. Okay, so if you have all these people around here, they don't have anywhere to stay and they live in the street, don't you think there's something wrong institutionally? I know this is a capitalist country. You get what you work for, but it's so strange that you can have so many people, able-bodied men and women, living in the streets. So they need to get closer to the institutions a little bit.
That's very profound,
Yeah.
We got to look deeper. So, Emmanuel, you believe we need to look deeper into our institutions and break it down from, just what the outside of the company might say one thing, but make sure that deep within is saying exactly what they're trying to say and doing what they're saying they're supposed to do.
Exactly.
Anybody other have any thoughts on an area that you've either seen positive growth or you need to see some more growth?
Well, I will jump in. I thought of 3 areas. I actually thought of the Me Too movement and how we have seen a lot of things come out that in the past were accepted or even expected. I also think that there's hope in what I'm seeing as far as global care and concern. We obviously saw a lot for Ukraine, and I'm hoping to see even more for the wars going on in other countries. I was hearing from my brother last night about Ethiopia and some of the conflict that's still going on there, and how Ilhan Omar has been an ally for that. So I'm starting to feel like globally we're caring and concerned for each other a little more than used to be. And the third thing I would say is the environment. I feel like we've come some leaps and strides, and we still have a long way to go, but I feel hopeful that people are paying attention.
It's a bigger movement.
I just pointed out a tiny house village today to someone I was taking around, so care and concern for others. It's coming around.
Good.
Love to hear that good news in a time like this, right? Anybody else have something? For this here question, we got more questions.
Well, for me, the difficulty is when you make the argument of human rights, it doesn't get a lot of traction because it's so broad. Mm-hmm. And if, for example, Emmanuel talked about the incident this person had, and for me, what I'm thinking is, wow, why didn't they get a lawyer? Because, as I said before, our Constitution, the first 10 amendments, provide for all those protections. And if the person comes to this country, they're thinking their human rights are being violated. Well, you got to be more specific than that. We all have human rights, but you must be able to articulate what specific aspect of those human rights that are being violated. You can't just wave a flag and say, my human rights are being violated. We understand it, but you're not going to get any traction, especially if you go into court. And so I understand that. Other areas, same things that affect folks in this society today. Racism, that's a human right violation. But if you put racism on the human rights spectrum or human rights analysis, you're going to get some weird results. We have a body of law, and we know exactly where to go if you're being discriminated against here in the courts, but it's still a violation of your human rights. So we got to be careful how we couch things and put it in this broad aspect of human rights, because if you don't articulate those rights properly, people are going to ignore you. So racism is at the top of it. And today, when I said today, over the years, people have become more outward about their first race. White supremacy was something that you didn't talk about in polite company. Now people feel the right, they have this right to do it, which is a human right, they have it. And that's one of the conflicts with human rights, is this person has some rights, this person has some rights, and then when these two rights clash is where we have a problem. So those are the kinds of things, the same things that affect black people, brown people, original people. Those are the same things that are affecting people around the world. It spills over. So it hasn't changed, it remains the same.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We do have to be more specific about the things that we call those human rights that we are supposed to be fighting for. And I really appreciate your analysis on that.
Education is a human right.
Education is a human right.
Education is a human right.
Absolutely.
And I was thinking about something that you said about the social justice part. No, he said racism. I said social justice. So I teach social justice at City University, and racism is one of the categories that we work with. I work with racism, ageism, socioeconomic status, immigrant status. There's all these multiple ability, not disability, abilities, and just thinking about all those different pieces that we have to look at when it comes to like a person's human rights and the social justice that all that falls into place. So when we look at education, and I'm teaching people who are going to go in the classrooms with our students, and how are they going to treat these students that don't look like them? And that's my biggest thing for them. How are you going to work with students that don't look like you? And having to call out the white supremacy cultural characteristics that happen with white teachers in classrooms full of students of color. So when he said racism, that social justice piece popped up in me, and I had to say something about education.
Absolutely, absolutely.
My broken record.
Hey, with our educational, all right, and with our educational take on human rights,
Did she really go to my question?
we're going to slide into our next question, which is, what resources would you recommend for the people who live in your city, or do you think we need more of available for people to access? So rights and services, help that you know of, that you would want to share with your community, and ones that you think we need more of, or they're underdeveloped, et cetera.
I'm thinking about Welcome Back, Carter, when the one guy used to be like,
One.
I'm dating myself.
One.
Anyway, I'm the research lady. I love to connect people to resources, and that's a big part of of my personal and work experience. You guys both mentioned 30 years, and also he had mentioned 30 years in the field. And there are some wonderful agencies in this city, and we have some very caring people. I recommend all of the mental health agencies for the most part. I know people have different experiences with that journey, but I just feel like mental health is so important. Right alongside substance use disorder treatment. I feel like that affects so many families and so many lives, and yet it's still like not accessed as much as it could be. I think we have wonderful housing things that are shifting right now. We've done a really good job since the pandemic to try and shore up the housing, but there's still a lot of people in pain and hurting. And as I spoke about with my work with trafficking, we have several agencies that are very good at providing some ways out for women and men who are in the sex industry. So we do have some wonderful nonprofits, BEST, that Mar is with. My employer is REST, Real Escape from the Sex Trade.
You guys hear that? Rest.
REST.
Real
yeah.
escape from the sex trade.
And there's just a number of wonderful organizations, OPS, Organization for Prostitution Survivors, and years ago there was none of that. So it's so wonderful to see some of those agencies in place to give people a way out. But I think in Seattle we are resource rich. We just have to be able to access the resources and make sure they're culturally competent, and we see people like us in leadership.
There are 2 organizations that I've worked with that are really for students. I do everything for young people. And one is Youth Care. I spent some time volunteering with Youth Care and raising money for Youth Care. And it was like fulfilling, like I wanted to do more. And then there is another one, Westside Baby, over in West Seattle, that I've done a lot of work with and philanthropy with. And just to be able to, and that's the idea, how do we get it out there that people know about these things?
Yeah.
And the one thing that Westside Baby does that I think is one of the coolest things, they have where you can go in and give different clothes, toys, things for kids, diapers, milk, all that stuff for any mom that needs any of that. But they don't just stop. A lot of places just stop at like the toddler. You only need help until that point, where Westside Baby actually gives a little bit more and gets into like the intermediate grades, like maybe 8, 9, 10-year-olds, and you have clothes and just resources for them and everything. And so those are 2 organizations that I would gladly like support, advertise, do what I can to get people to see those. And I used them when I was a principal. I had about 10% of my population at my school were unhoused students that were living in temporary housing or transition housing. I had 13 cabs that brought students from different parts of the city because of the law, McKinney-Vento, that basically says, and I do it in my own words, we want students to have stability, and if they are used to their home school, then if they become unhoused, then the district is responsible for letting them have that structure of being at the same school. So they will send cabs and buses and Ubers and everything, and I would have a 13-lined cab picking up my students to take them to Kent, Auburn, all over the place, and I was a principal in South Seattle. So they would have that stability in their lives. So I was able to partner with other places and just let them know about. I had some that ended up having to use Youth Care because they couldn't be with their parents. I mean, there's just all these things that happen. So that's why I support those types of organizations for our young people, because they need them.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing those resources. Remember, the first one was Youth Care, and the other one, what was the second one?
Westside Baby.
Westside Baby.
Yeah, I have a colleague went over there today to Westside Baby.
Look at us.
All right, this one's a doozy. You're gonna have to think. Ready? If you could which of these panelists here could you see a collaboration with for the future, the upcoming years to come, a collaboration on how you would use your individual skills and resources, to improve human rights in the areas that you know best?
I would start with that. Well, my understanding, and I think for the most part, we all see human rights as the basic rights and protections that belong to all people. Everybody, regardless of whether you are an immigrant or a native born, we should all have the covering of the protection of our basic rights. So saying that and looking at our background, we work with communities, we work with different businesses. So, and they have explained all of what they do, and I think we'll be interested in working with all of you. If it is a basic business law, or what they need to do as people to always feel protected whenever they go out there, if it is a way to put us in touch with the material and the financial resources that ensure the protection of rights of our people, we're willing to work with you. So before you leave, you can give me a business card. Yeah, thank you.
I was thinking that when you were speaking, I was like, I'm going to talk to him and recruit him for DDI, Democrats for Diversity. And when you were speaking, I'm thinking the whole time, I'm going to talk to her, I'm going to talk to him. So that's what we do.
Yeah.
I know Mary and I had already kind of had a conversation because working with the young women and men that she works with, they usually haven't had the education pieces, right? So how do we bring, how can I help with that piece? She was telling me there's a lot of stuff they have to get through first, but then we want to get them GEDs, or we want to get them, back into high school, or we want to be able to do something with them. So I'm trying to figure out how I can help you.
And you'd be surprised. People are from all walks of life that are involved in the sex industry, so you'd be surprised.
No, but I.
Mr. Connell, are you too cool?
It's cool in here. But with respect to collaboration, there are a couple of areas that I see. For example, this myth about immigrants taking your jobs away and immigrants are dangerous to the American society. That's a complete falsehood, and that needs to be nipped in the bud. If you were to do, and just introspectively, if you did a cost-benefit analysis and compare the contribution of immigrants to this society, it far outweighs their contribution to this society far outweighs any negativity that we can talk about. You're gonna have some problems. So what I'm advocating for is, let's do an analysis, a cost-benefit analysis of immigrants' contribution to the American society, present it to the people of America, and let them decide and see, instead of politicians playing games with us about how dangerous immigrants are. The second thing that I've observed is there is some really serious thoughts in this area, especially from the University of Washington. I'm a graduate of the University of Washington, so I tend to be biased, but the evidence speaks for itself. There are some really good ideas coming out of the University of Washington with respect to housing. I heard a speech at a Rotary meeting. There was a professor, I forgot his name, and he started to give this economic analysis about housing. And his point was that housing, the lack of housing, the homelessness is a housing problem. And I said, what are you talking about? What does that mean? And after he was finished with his speech, the bottom line is that we can control the problem. We can change zoning laws to make housing more affordable, more available. Those are some of the things that we need to be looking into. And I think with a collaboration with academia, business, and the politicians, we could put our heads together and come up with some solutions. But those are the kinds of things that I see happening. And we here in Seattle, we have some of the brightest people in the world right here among us. So we can solve pretty much any problem. And when you ask about collaboration in the future, that's what I see happening.
Okay, my panelists, I could go on and on asking you questions, and I really hope to see some of your collaborations in the future. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for speaking with us. We are moving swiftly on to our next section.
Thank you. Thank you for facilitating.
Got it?
Lillian?
That's it?
Oh, no. There's like a couple more awards.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Seattle Human Rights Commission, we would like to also recognize our organizational awards. So first, for Human Rights Leader Business, the award goes to Youth Care. Yes, well deserved. And for Human Rights Leader in terms of organization, Ways Forward. And last but certainly not least, the honorary award goes to University of Washington Center for Human Rights, with special recognition to Angelina Godoy and this evening's student presenters. Yes. And at this point, I would like to thank everyone and all of our panelists, as well as our awardees. Thank you for making this an enriching human rights event. And I'll give you applause too as well, well deserved. And thank each and every one of you, both in person as well as on live stream, for attending. And on behalf of the commissioners, thank you very much. Stand up, I need to recognize you. Thank you and congratulations. That's it. That's it. Thank you very much. Certainly.